Hi, this is Doug Wachesek, founder of SorryWorks, and welcome to the SorryWorks Minute. Each week we're going to be featuring a different topic about disclosure and apology in the SorryWorks Minute and bring it to you through our friends at YouTube. This week we're going to focus on how SorryWorks got started. This is a story that many folks have heard around the country through my live presentations. It's featured in the SorryWorks book, and I thought it would be great to bring this story to life through YouTube and through these short videos. My journey in this thing called SorryWorks began in May of 1998. That's when I lost my oldest brother, Jim, to medical errors. Jim walked into a Cincinnati, Ohio hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning complaining of chest, shoulder, neck, and stomach pain so severe it got him out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you have to understand, Jim was a big, burly, tough guy, the kind of guy that got asked to play football in high school, so he shouldered pain extremely well. My dad liked to say Jim was a macho man. So for Jim to show up in an emergency room at 2 o'clock in the morning without mom and dad shoving him there meant something was really wrong in his care or his health care. So Jim gets to the emergency room. The doctors take a look at him and say, well, look, you're built like a brick house. You must be something wrong with your stomach. To which my brother replied, or something's wrong with my heart. They did do an EKG that evening. They found a murmur in his heart, and my brother said, well, in my 39 years of living, I've never had any heart issues as far as I know. I've never had a murmur that I know of. And again, the doctors basically said, well, look at you. You're built like a brick house. It must be something wrong with your stomach. They proceeded to give him an ulcer cocktail for a couple hours and sent him home around 5 o'clock in the morning, still in excruciating pain. And when they sent him home, they had not drawn his blood. So he went home around 5 o'clock in the morning, still in a lot of pain. Around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, he called my parents, explained the situation. They got him to the family doctor. The family doctor said, you need him, get him back to the hospital right away. The doctor said the hospital dropped the ball. So they get him back to the same hospital, get him back to the same emergency room. By mid-morning, they're drawing his blood. They finally drew the blood. They find the enzyme in the blood showing that the cardiac muscles, the heart muscles, are being damaged. And by early afternoon, they had Jim in intensive care. And this is where the holes of Swiss cheese, as we say in patient safety, started to line up. The computer monitor over Jim's bed read Ray Wachesek. My brother's name was Jim. Who's Ray Wachesek? That's my dad. Very significant because my dad had a heart stress test done in this very same hospital only a couple months prior to my brother's death. My dad at that time was in his mid-60s, had a perfect cardiac workup, no blockage. The cardiologist said to him he knocked the machine off the wall, and he proceeded to write in the chart, this guy's got the heart of a 30-year-old man. Yet, a few months down the road, my brother is laying there in that ICU bed. My dad sees the computer monitor with his name on it, Ray Wachesek, and Jim in the bed. Dad goes and gets the attending physician and says, wait, I think there's been a mistake or a mix-up here. I'm Ray Wachesek. That's Jim Wachesek. The doctor wanted to have an argument with Dad about who was who. My dad finally had to pull out driver's licenses to prove identities. Well, they eventually changed the computer monitor to read Jim Wachesek, but not before they're using my dad's charts to form a diagnosis of a bacterial infection of the heart. Jim was admitted on a Tuesday. He died on a Thursday evening, 2.5 days later. For 2 days, they plugged Jim full of antibiotics, trying to treat this bacterial infection of the heart they thought they were dealing with. Thursday afternoon, the last day of his life, Jim was spitting up blood. The oxygen meter, the alarm on his finger was constantly going off, beep, beep, beep. He was in a lot of pain. He was going downhill. They decided to run a probe up his leg to see if maybe they'd missed something around the heart. When they got up there, they found 4 arteries blocked. Jim crashed during the test. They were able to get him into emergency open heart surgery. They were able to get him on the bypass machine and do what they needed to do surgically. But every time they tried to get him off the bypass machine, try to take him off and get his heart restarted, it simply wouldn't work. Every time they tried to restart the heart, it just simply wouldn't pump the blood. We were told later the back of his heart was basically blown out. Jim died on the operating room table. The surgeon, who had not been involved in Jim's care up to that point, was literally brought in to throw the Hail Mary pass from downtown. They brought him in at the last minute from downtown that dreadful Thursday afternoon. He walked out of the operating room in full surgical garb, went right up to my parents, looked them in the eyes and said, "If the jerks at this hospital had done their job and got your boy to me 2 days ago when they should have, I could have saved him. We do bypasses all the time, but I'm sorry to tell you, your son is dead." That was the last bit of honesty and candor we got out of that hospital. After the funeral, after all the relatives, all the friends went home, my parents went back to the hospital looking for answers. Nobody would speak to them. Nobody was empowered to speak to them. No one knew what to say. Even the surgeon who was so honest and candid that night said, "Look, folks, the lawyers have told me not to talk to you any further. You're going to just have to go home." This circle the wagons routine made my parents furious. It made med-mal litigation, which had been third or fourth thing we were concerned about, the only option to get any answers or justice. It made money, which should have been the third or fourth thing we should have been worried about that time, the only thing worth fighting over. So we filed a med-mal lawsuit. Depositions were a living hell on my parents. Could you imagine being grilled about the death of your firstborn son, being made to feel like it's your fault? Mercifully, after a year and a half, the judge turned to the hospital, the doctors, all their attorneys, and said, "You're wasting my time. Malpractice is clear. The taxpayers have better things for me to be doing in this court than adjudicating this case. Take care of this family." At that point, one of the negotiators literally turned to His Honor and said, "What do you have in mind, Judge? Give them a couple $1,000s to make this one go away?" I'll never forget the phone call I got from my dad. I was living in Chicago at the time. My parents still in Cincinnati, and they're still there today. I was living in Chicago at the time. My dad called me with these words: "Doug, they think your brother Jim is worth $1,500. $1,500. It was absolutely insulting. Fortunately, the judge became insulted too and became very angry on behalf and said, "Look, I told you to take care of these people. Don't rip them off. Until you take care of them, don't come back to my chambers. Get this case taken care of and do it fairly." Well, we received a pretty sizable settlement. After my parents signed the liability waivers, so we can't sue anymore, the attorneys said sorry, but it was just empathy. There was no apology. There was no admission of fault. There was no explanation of what happened. And we, at that time, we didn't hear any more from the doctors or the nurses or the hospital. So we didn't get closure, complete closure. We got money, which everyone thinks med-mal is all about, but it isn't. We didn't really get to know how medicine was going to get better, and we didn't get to hear those healing words, "I'm sorry, we made a mistake, and we're going to try to do better on the next patient or family." So it was a prison in a way for our family, but how much you want to bet it's a prison, or has been a prison, and continues to be a prison for the doctors and nurses who were involved in my brother's care. They never received closure, and I've given this talk all around the country, and I don't know how many times I've had doctors and nurses come up to me afterwards and talk about the case that happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that they never got closure. They've been stuck in a prison because they weren't allowed to talk about it and apologize and get forgiveness that comes back across the table. So that's how Sorry Works got started. That's the passion that leads me to this work I do on a daily basis, trying to help doctors and nurses and other clinicians communicate more effectively with patients and families post-event, teach them how to be proactive post-event. A terrible medical error, a crippling error, even a fatal error doesn't need to lead to litigation, doesn't need to lead to a lawsuit and years of fighting and stress and worry. It can be resolved if doctors and nurses, hospitals, insurance companies, defense lawyers have the tools and the ability, and if they're empowered to do the right thing post-event. Not only right by the patient and family, but right by themselves as well. It lowers litigation costs, and provides healing and closure for those caregivers, people who need healing and closure just as much as me, the patient and family. And the really big benefit is by talking about our mistakes, we get a chance to learn from them, and we're a lot less likely to repeat them down the road. So that's what Sorry Works is all about. That's how we got going. That's where we're going, and we're going to keep going. And I really appreciate you viewing this Sorry Works Minute. I know it took longer than a minute. We'll have many more YouTube videos in the weeks and months to come. Thank you very much.